Hold on to your seats because Formula One is about to get even more intense. The FIA has dropped a bombshell on Max Verstappen following last weekend's high-stakes race. What seemed like just another competitive drive has now stirred up a storm of controversy, bringing back memories of previous clashes in Austin 2024 and even as far back as Brazil 2021. But this time, there's a new twist that's making everyone ask, is Formula One finally ready to confront Verstappen's bold driving style? And what could these decisions mean for the future of racing as we know it? Make sure you stay with us to get all the details because this story is far from over. The latest race weekend wasn't just another thrilling competition on the track, it sparked a fierce debate among fans, drivers, and officials alike. The FIA's decision to review Max Verstappen's actions has triggered a new wave of speculation, linking his defensive maneuvers with incidents in Austin this year, and even drawing comparisons to a similar clash in Brazil 2021. Both moments have raised eyebrows over Verstappen's aggressive racing style, which some argue pushes the limits of what's fair and safe in Formula One. But this time, the scrutiny isn't just on the track. A new factor, which had been growing quietly in the background, has suddenly come into focus. This issue dominated discussions in Mexico last weekend, as it's something that many believe Formula One must address urgently. So, what exactly is this mystery issue, and how does it tie into Verstappen's approach to racing? This question is at the heart of a larger debate about the future of Formula One's rules and regulations. It all started when Verstappen received a set of penalties after the race. These weren't just small infractions, they were significant enough to ignite controversy online, with fans and analysts questioning whether the penalties were too severe or justified. One specific detail stood out. Adding fuel to the fire. One of the stewards responsible for issuing these penalties was Tim Mayer, a British official with strong connections to McLaren as the son of its founder, Teddy Mayer. This connection didn't go unnoticed by the fans, many of whom saw it as a possible source of bias in the ruling against Verstappen. The situation got even more heated when Johnny Herbert, a former F1 driver who had served as head of the stewards that weekend, publicly defended the penalties. Herbert didn't just stand by the decision, he emphasized that Verstappen's 10-second penalties for incidents at the Mexican Grand Prix were both fair and necessary. According to Herbert, who's also British, the penalty should serve as a clear message that Formula One is serious about enforcing its rules, even against top drivers like Verstappen. However, this sentiment isn't shared by everyone. Some fans and analysts believe the penalties will only fuel Verstappen's determination to race even more aggressively, especially when competing against championship contenders like Lando Norris. Herbert, however, remains convinced that the penalties were appropriate and has stood firm in the face of criticism. He even hinted that, in his view, the penalties might not be enough to curb Verstappen's drive to dominate on the track. The debate has quickly escalated, drawing comparisons to last year's controversial overtake by Norris in Austin, which also resulted in a penalty. Verstappen's response to that incident led to another round of penalties in Mexico, where he was docked a total of 20 seconds for two separate offenses, one for gaining an advantage by going off the track and another for forcing a rival off the track. With another FIA meeting planned at the upcoming Qatar Grand Prix, many expect that officials will re-examine these incidents and perhaps refine the rules of engagement for future races. As Formula One gears up for the season's final races, these decisions could bring major changes to how drivers are expected to handle close racing. For now, however, Herbert believes that Verstappen will continue to push boundaries, testing both his rivals and the limits of the rules. Despite the FIA's attempts to clamp down on aggressive driving, it seems unlikely that Verstappen will back down anytime soon. His focus remains on winning, and if that means pushing rivals like Lando Norris to their limits, Verstappen appears more than willing to take the risk. In fact, some believe his recent actions on the track show that he's ready to do whatever it takes to secure his place at the top, even if it means skirting the edges of what's considered fair play. What's even more interesting is that from Verstappen's perspective, these penalties may simply be part of the game, a cost of doing business in the high-stakes world of Formula One. While some fans think he should take a more cautious approach, others argue that his bold, fearless style is what makes him a formidable driver. The penalties issued at the Mexican Grand Prix may be seen by some as a deterrent, but for Verstappen, they seem only to add fuel to his competitive fire. Meanwhile, the debate around potential bias in the stewards' rulings continues to grow. Many fans and even some team members pointed out that the head of the stewards, Johnny Herbert, and one of the key decision-makers, Tim Mayer, both share British backgrounds, similar to that of Lando Norris. This connection has led to accusations that the penalties against Verstappen might be driven by favoritism rather than fairness. especially given that Norris's controversial overtake in Austin resulted in a lighter 5-second penalty. The differences in how these penalties were applied have left many fans feeling that Verstappen is being unfairly targeted. Even with all these controversies swirling, Herbert has remained steadfast. He insists that the decisions made during the Mexico race weekend were based purely on the rules and that nationality plays no part in the steward's choices. According to Herbert, the panel strictly adheres to the guidelines set forth by the FIA, and each decision is carefully reviewed to ensure consistency. But even with his assurance, many fans remain unconvinced, arguing that the repeated clashes involving Verstappen and Norris highlight a deeper issue with how the rules are applied. As Formula One approaches the final races of the season, these debates aren't just about penalties or driving styles. They strike at the heart of what fans want to see in the sport: a fair, thrilling competition where every driver has an equal shot at victory. With a crucial meeting planned between the FIA and the drivers at the Qatar Grand Prix, all eyes will be on whether any meaningful changes will emerge. Could we see a shift in how Formula One approaches rules of engagement, or will the status quo remain? For now, Verstappen seems poised to keep pushing forward, confident in his abilities and unshaken by the penalties. To him, the championship race is still on, and he's not about to let a few penalties get in his way. With everything on the line, the final races promise not only thrilling action on the track but also a showdown over the rules that could shape the future of Formula One. As if the tensions around Verstappen's penalties weren't enough, last weekend's developments have only intensified the rivalry between him and Lando Norris. Norris, who had his own run-in with penalties in Austin, faced a controversial 5-second punishment for an overtake that was deemed out of bounds. Many expected the same standards to apply in Mexico, but Verstappen was hit with 2 separate 10-second penalties, one for gaining an advantage by going off the track and another for forcing a rival wide. The stark difference in these rulings has stirred up a lot of frustration among fans, sparking claims that there might be inconsistency or even bias in the way penalties are applied. With the season nearing its conclusion, there is a strong sense of anticipation as Formula One's drivers and teams look to the upcoming Qatar Grand Prix, where a meeting with the FIA will address these controversies. There's a growing call from both drivers and fans for clear, consistent rules that make racing as fair as possible. Some insiders even hint that changes might be on the way, which could alter how drivers approach close competition. But for now, one thing is clear: Verstappen's aggressive style isn't likely to change. Herbert, the head steward during the Mexico race, believes that even a series of penalties won't deter Verstappen from pushing the boundaries. He anticipates that Verstappen will continue to race hard, often testing his rivals and, at times, skirting the edge of the rules. This racing style, while undeniably thrilling, has divided fans and drivers alike. Supporters of Verstappen argue that his bold, take-no-prisoners attitude is what makes him exciting to watch and elevates the sport. But critics feel that his style goes too far, risking the safety of others and overshadowing the spirit of fair competition. Norris, for one, has expressed his preference for a cleaner, more respectful approach to racing, a philosophy he believes makes for a better sport. Meanwhile, McLaren CEO Zak Brown has been vocal in his criticism of the steward's decision in Mexico, calling it insufficient in addressing Verstappen's conduct. He's not alone in this view. Red Bull's team principal Christian Horner also weighed in, but from the opposite perspective, arguing that the penalties were overly harsh and unnecessary. This back and forth has only heightened the tension between teams, making it evident that opinions on Verstappen's driving are sharply divided. With each side firmly rooted in their stance, Herbert stood by the decision, stating that the stewards had followed the guidelines and applied the rules as objectively as possible. He reiterated that, with the agreement of all teams, they reached a fair conclusion. To Herbert, Verstappen's penalties in Mexico were necessary, given the Dutch driver's aggressive maneuvers, which he described as borderline reckless, especially when it involved forcing a fellow driver off the track. As the FIA gears up for the Qatar Grand Prix meeting, fans and teams alike are waiting anxiously to see what decisions will emerge. If the stewards decide to tighten the regulations, we may witness a major shift in how close racing is handled in Formula One. Such changes could compel drivers to reconsider their approaches, prioritizing cautious, strategic moves over bold, boundary-pushing tactics. For Verstappen, a change in the rules might force him to adjust his famously aggressive style, or it could motivate him to find even smarter ways to maintain his edge on the track. But if the FIA holds firm on its current guidelines, it's likely that these intense, high-stakes duels will continue, perhaps with more controversial outcomes. The tension between teams, stewards, and fans is undeniable, and it speaks to the passion and competitive spirit that define Formula One. The sport's future hinges on how well it can balance thrilling races with fair play, ensuring that drivers have the freedom to push limits but within a framework that values safety and sportsmanship. For now, Verstappen and his team are focused on the upcoming races. Each lap, each turn, and each maneuver will carry immense weight, not just in the championship standings but also in how Formula One is perceived by the world. Every decision made on the track and in the stewards' room adds to the story of this season, a season that could be remembered as one of the most dramatic and divisive in recent memory. As fans, we can only watch and speculate. Will the FIA take a bold stand? Will Verstappen's style be tempered, or will he continue to race with the intensity and fearlessness that has defined his career? One thing is certain: the world of Formula One is at a crossroads, and the decisions made in the coming weeks will shape its path for seasons to come. In the end, Formula One isn't just about the speed and the thrill, it's about the relentless pursuit of victory, the drama of rivalry, and the delicate balance of rules and rivalry. The upcoming races promise more of this excitement and intensity, with the hope that the sport we love will only grow stronger, fairer, and even more exhilarating. So, gear up and stay tuned, because the journey is far from over, and we're just getting started.